tipping has a long and complex history. The practice is believed to have originated in medieval Europe, where it was customary for guests at inns to leave a small gratuity for their servers. In the United States, tipping began to gain widespread acceptance in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as more and more Americans began to travel and dine out. During this time, it became customary to leave a small tip, typically 10 to 15%, in restaurants and hotels. However, the practice of tipping was not without controversy. Some people felt that it was unfair to pay some workers, such as servers and bartenders, more than others, such as cooks and dishwashers, and that it was demeaning for workers to have to rely on tips for their livelihood. Nevertheless, tipping has remained a prevalent practice in the United States and many other countries to this day. In America, it is customary to tip service workers such as servers, bartenders, hairdressers, and taxi drivers. The standard tip amount is 15 to 20% of the total bill or service cost. For example, if the total bill at a restaurant is $100, a standard tip would be $15 to $20. Tips can be given in cash or added to a credit card payment. It is also common to tip hotel staff, such as bellhops and housekeeping, a small amount for their services. Tipping etiquette also suggests that it is appropriate to tip a few dollars for services like valet parking, coat check, or concierge. Some businesses like nail salon, barbershops, spas, and gyms tip is optional and depends on the service received. Whether or not to tip is a personal decision and can vary depending on the individual and the situation. In general, tipping is expected in the service industry in America for jobs like servers, bartenders, hairdressers, and taxi drivers, where the worker's income relies on tips. Tipping is also a way to show appreciation for good service. However, it is important to note that not everyone can afford to tip or may have different cultural or personal beliefs about the practice. Ultimately, whether or not to tip is up to the individual and should be based on their own values and financial situation. In America, the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, does not require employers to pay employees a minimum wage if they are receiving tips. Some states and cities have their own laws that require employers to pay tipped employees a higher wage, but in most cases, the federal minimum wage for tipped employees is $2.13 per hour. This means that in many cases, tipped workers rely heavily on tips to make a living wage. However, it is important to note that employers are still required to ensure that their employees are receiving at least the federal minimum wage when tips are factored in. If an employee's tips, combined with their wage, do not add up to the minimum wage, the employer is legally required to make up the difference.